are absolutely thrilled to see so many people here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We want to especially welcome our prospective youth ZOA members, particularly at that time when membership is of vital importance. This evening we have the good fortune of hearing Professor Abe Sion. He served as Deputy State Attorney for Israel and was instrumental in changing the election law governing voting for the Prime Minister. Professor Sion was a Lieutenant Colonel in the IDF with 17 years of service as a judge and has a weekly program on Israel's Reshet Bet radio station. He has headed parliamentary delegations to Europe and participated in debates concerning the Arab-Israeli conflict. He appears frequently on radio and TV talk shows, was a member of the Executive Committee of the Israeli Bar, and also served as president of the Board of Directors of Israel Tourist Industries. He is chairman of the Council of Real Estate Appraisers, chief editor of Yaad magazine, and chairman of the academic division of the Likud Party. He is a graduate of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and earned a PhD at the University of Cambridge. Abe Sion is currently head of a law firm in Tel Aviv, actively involved in both research and advocacy. Chairman of the Center for Law and Mass Media at Ariel University Center, senior lecturer in business law at the Department of Economics and Business Administration. I'd like you to know there will be a question and answer directly after his presentation, but for now, please put your hands together for Abe Sion. He will speak to us on alternatives to a two-state solution.
And it's all one person?
Good line.
Thank you very much. First of all, I write my name with an S, but it's pronounced Z. So it's Abraham Zion, or if you'd like that, Abe Sion. So, and in Hebrew, it's Avraham Sion.
Now you tell me.
We are at the crucial moment now. I hate to say that because every year we say about Israel, we are at a crucial moment. But seriously, Israel is on a crossroad. And I think that the Oslo Agreement is the worst thing that happened to Israel since the birth of the state, the Jewish state of Israel. Now it turned into, they say, the two-state solution, but actually we're talking about the Oslo Agreement. What we did is, we brought in a Trojan horse. We got Arafat, who was 3,000 kilometers away in Tunisia, and told him, come over and make peace with us. We did not realize at the time, when we say we, I mean the Israeli government. Because part of the Israeli public, and I belong to that part, from the very beginning, we were against the Oslo Agreement, and we foresaw what this agreement is going to bring to us, the Israelis, and the Jews all over the world. It was a mistake that not many countries could have withstood them, because we brought in a Trojan horse with no boundaries, a situation whereby there is no going back. In fact, it was something like the law of return of the Palestinians, because when we made the Oslo Agreement, we had something like 100,000 terrorists come into the Eretz Israel or Israel. that is from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And one could see that soon afterwards, there were buses being blown up. I mean, the buses started blowing up in 1995. And the Oslo Agreement was in in September 1993, very, very, very soon after that. That is very soon after Arafat landed over in the state of Israel. This situation, for the first time in the history of Israel, brought up the question whether Israel has a future. We never had this questioning, and I can speak from my own experience, whether Israel is going to survive or not. But for the first time, the Oslo Agreement started bringing up this question. Not only the Arabs talked about this, but the Jews started talking about it. And many told me, we don't think Israel is going to survive in 20, 25 years. So the Oslo Agreement was the countdown for the destruction of the state of Israel. I can tell you that also. I can give you an example. I was working very closely with a representative of the Adenauer Foundation in Israel. And he brought in many people. He also asked me to send people to Germany to see, to have more friendship. And he told me, you can't imagine what's happening. So many Jews are asking for German nationality, citizenship. Jews started looking for insurance. They started asking for other nationalities. If anybody was a descendant of a German or a Hungarian or a Czech, they went to the embassies and wanted, for the first time, they started asking for nationality, for citizenship. This never happened before. So this, what's called the two-state solution or the Oslo Agreement, brought a great change in Israel. There was always Labour, Likud, but they were going together on the same road. Suddenly, part of this nation, part of the state of Israel, part of the Jews, suddenly went left. So now there was a dichotomy. There was a situation whereby there was a lot of hatred because the left thought that the right is not allowing them to finally arrive to peace. And the right thought that the left is going crazy. It's going into a situation whereby there is no return, no coming back, no going back. So there was a lot of tension within the Jewish population in the state of Israel. And many times, the leftists would embrace the Palestinians and not shake hands with the right, with their brothers. I can tell you that when Rabin died, Arafat was embraced by Leah Rabin, his wife. Was embraced. And when Netanyahu wanted to come and visit her, she said, I don't want to see this man. So you can see the tension, the way it was. But I'll tell you what the Oslo Agreement did to Israel. First and foremost, suddenly Israel became Goliath. And the Palestinians became the underdog. The whole world forgot that there are 5.5 million Jews living amongst 250 million Arab Muslims who don't want to see Israel there. So we were the underdog. And the press was against us because we were the underdog. And when we were fighting in defense, they said we were attacking them. So this is one thing that changed the whole picture. Before we were the underdog. We had 7 Arab countries, states, armies. But now we have terrorists, which are more dangerous than states, than armies. And yet we were the Goliath, we're strong, they see our tanks, and they see the Arab Palestinian who throws the stone. But with a stone you can kill people. With a stone you can frighten people. I don't know whether any of you had any experience of a stone being thrown on his car or her car. I can tell you, it's like a bomb. I had stones thrown in my car. And it is frightening. And when the stone hits the head, it's like a bullet. So, this is one thing that has changed. The other thing that has changed is that suddenly Palestine stopped being just an area. Palestine became a state. You know that the Jews were the only people who offered the Palestinians a state. Now we speak about Palestinians. I don't know whether anybody knows what a Palestinian is.
Jew.
Is a man who was born in Palestine, a Palestinian. Like a man who was born in the United States. Is someone who has a Palestinian passport a Palestinian. Golda Meir always said, I am a Palestinian. Here, I have a Palestinian passport. Is the Jewish Agency for Palestine a Palestinian entity? Is the Jerusalem Post, which was once called the Palestinian Post, a Palestinian newspaper? This whole thing of Palestinians was born in 1964. Before that, there was no nation called Palestine. And there was no state called Palestine. And Jerusalem was never the capital of any state since 4,000 years ago. And yet, a nation which was formed 40, 50 years ago says, we want Jerusalem. And we put them in the same par as we. We who have 650 times Jerusalem in the Bible, we speak to them about Jerusalem. We want to divide Jerusalem. We want to give them the holy places. And some of our prime ministers want to give up the holy temple. Amazing. There is something in the Jewish people, something of the galut. We want to appease our enemies. We want to give and give and give and be liked. And the more we gave, the more animosity we got from the Arabs, from the Palestinians, from the world. So, when you think of it, the Norwegian in Bremen, the Swede in Stockholm, he doesn't know the history. If you ask him, which is older, Palestine or Israel? He knows that Palestine, he looks at his maps, Palestine was 2,000 years. What is Israel? It's only 65 years. So who is older? Who has the right for this land? Of course the Palestinians. So what we did instead of Palestine being history, we brought it to the front. We gave them a state. And now they want more and more and more. So Tzipi Livni is so happy that she managed to convince Abu Mazen to give up the Holy Temple, but to get all the Jerusalem, all the east side of Jerusalem. And the question is, on what right are they asking for it? We offered to give them a state. You know, the Egyptians ruled Gaza for 19 years. The Jordanians ruled the West Bank for 19 years. They even did think about, they didn't have the notion to give them a state. And the Arabs did not even think of demanding a state. But part of our people went to the Arabs and told them, you have the Supreme Court of Israel. You could go to the Supreme Court and ask for this, that, and the other. And once we decided to give them, then the question is, if we say, if a Prime Minister of Israel says that the West Bank or Judea and Samaria is occupied territory, then what do you expect the world to say? Get out of there. It is not your land. You admit that it does not belong to you. Get out of there. And this is what's happening with the boycott. We have academic boycott, economical boycott, political boycott. Boycotts all over. We didn't have this in the past. We didn't have this before Oslo. It all started since Oslo and especially in the last 10 years. And you know who were the instigators of boycotts, whether it's academic boycott or other boycotts?
Left.
Israelis
No,
and Jews living in the West. They were the main instigators of boycotts. I have a radio show, and in one of the radio shows, I encountered a professor from Tel Aviv University. And I was telling her, have you been to Ariel? She said, oh no, God forbid. And I said, you know, it's only 40 kilometers from Tel Aviv. I have an office in Tel Aviv. It takes me about half an hour to get there. But to Ariel, it takes me 40 minutes. And she said, and I told her there's nothing to be afraid of. She said, no, you don't understand me. I will never go to Ariel. I said, why? Are you afraid? She said, no. This is occupied land. You occupied it from the Arabs. And then I told her, where do you teach? She says, in Tel Aviv University. And I said, Tel Aviv University is in Sheikh Mounes, which is an Arab village. Are you going to give it up? Oh no, it's not the same thing. So some of our people distinguish between Hebron and Bethlehem and Ashkelon and Acre. But the Arabs do not distinguish between the two. The Arabs think that Tel Aviv belongs to them. Tel Aviv is only a suburb of Jaffa. Acre belongs to them. In fact, all Israel within the Green Line belongs to them. And when they speak about the end of occupation, they do not mean the end of occupation in Gaza. nor do they mean the end of occupation in the West Bank. They mean the end of Israel. And some of our people still have a problem in understanding that. Another thing that happened because of the Oslo Agreement, that the Jews have waived their right from now to eternity on the most holy places. Hebron, Bethlehem, Shechem, Beit El, Efrat, all these places that are mentioned in the Bible. And let me tell you that whenever I am abroad, in Europe, in the United States, but especially in Europe, I go and visit the churches because they are like museums. And in every church I see the Bible open. And on one of the pages there is Israel. There is Shechem. There is Hebron. So the Christians do know the meaning of these places. But Shimon Peres, our honorable president, once asked, now what do you want to do in Hebron? When were you lastly in Hebron? When did you go to Bethlehem? We don't need all these places. They mean nothing. I don't know whether President Obama would say, I'll give up California because I haven't been there in the last 40 years. Absurd as it may sound. But this was the attitude. And they promised us, they promised, a new Middle East, whereby our sons will no longer go to the army. Our sons will have new horizons, and Israel will live in peace. But let me tell you one thing. I served in Gaza for 17 years. I could walk in the streets of Gaza with uniform, without having weapon on me. I could go to any restaurant I wanted. I could order hummus and falafel, and I would pay them with shekels, and they would say, Naam ya Sidi, thank you very much, sir. Can any one of us do this now? If anybody by mistake went into a Palestinian village, he would be crucified. He would be lynched by mistake. So the situation has really changed enormously and changed the whole position of us in that area. Also, any nation who accepts the fact that another nation has a right on his country, delegitimize himself. If we say that the West Bank belongs to the Arabs and that we are occupying that area, which is totally absurd, that Ariel Sharon said that on television. But if we accede to that, if we say that this is the situation, then we delegitimize ourselves. Because that means that we have no right on that area. And today, the Palestinians say openly, we are going to bring to a delegitimization of Israel in a way that more countries are going to accept us than Israel, which is becoming true. there are more countries who would vote for the Palestinian state than for Israel. So we have two nations fighting on the same area. And let me tell you, when I was a kid, I used to ask, why aren't we talking to the Palestinians? And they said, what do we have to talk with them about? They want what we have. But suddenly, we changed course. We decided to talk to them. And you know when? When the Palestinians were in the worst position ever. That was soon after the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, when nobody wanted to have Palestinians because the Palestinians backed Saddam Hussein. And at that time, we approached them and said, we told Arafat, look, you've been a terrorist all your life. You can't even go to the United Nations. They take you from the airport to the United Nations and they take you back. We'll make you a president. You'll have the red carpet. And suddenly a terrorist became a head of state. And this head of state, from the moment he signed the agreement, he did not implement one section of the Oslo agreement. I've read the Oslo agreement. It's not one agreement. It's about 5 agreements. Not one section has been carried out by the Palestinians. And especially the main section, that there will be no war and all problems will be solved by negotiation and by peaceful means. He said it all over. But not one section has been implemented or carried out. So the problem is not to make more agreements with the Palestinians. We have enough agreements with them. The problem is to bring them to want peace. But they do not want peace. They want Israel annihilated. They could have had a state a long time ago. A long time ago. And it's a fact that President Obama either does not see the picture in the right way, or he's so committed to the Palestinians and to the Muslims.
Yeah.
He's so committed that he doesn't care if Israel vanishes.
That's right.
Yeah, she just wants
You know that the Balfour Declaration said that Palestine that is Jordan, what's today known as Jordan, and what was known as Eretz Israel, all this area, from the Iraqi border to the Mediterranean Sea, will be the homeland of the Jewish people. That was in the Balfour Declaration. And when Britain was in control of Palestine, the British mandate, in the British mandate, all this area was meant to be a homeland to the Jewish people. Of course, without prejudicing the people who lived there. This was enacted into the San Remo Agreement, and then later on into the League of Nations, and later on into the United Nations Charter. So it's an official that Israel, that Palestine is the homeland of the Jewish people, not of the Arabs. The Arabs can live there, but they don't have a national right on Palestine. What Britain did in 1946, it took out the Jordan, the whole area, which was called later on Transjordan, gave it to a prince from Saudi Arabia, Hashemite prince, Abdallah. And it formed a state that was called Transjordan. So Israel was left, or rather Palestine was left with 1/3 of the area that was promised to the Jewish people. Then there was the partition plan, and the Arabs did not accept the partition plan, and therefore 7 armies invaded Israel. And then there was formed, the West Bank was formed by Jordan. It was annexed to Jordan, but nobody accepted it, except for Britain and Pakistan. Pakistan was a Muslim country, and Britain was a protector of Jordan, but even Arab countries did not accept it. And therefore, when Israel fought the war of 1967, which was a defense war, it had more right. I'm not talking about the Bible, I'm talking about international law. It had more right than any other state on Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And then there was after the 1967 war, there was the Security Council Resolution 242 that said in clear words that Israel would not withdraw from all the territories, nor from the territories, but from territories that were gained by this 1967 war. And Israel at that time, or later on, has returned more than 80%, if not more, of the territories to Egypt. And also there was, the whole agreement was against, and the agreements were with states, not with Palestinian entity, which did not arise at the time, but it was with states. Therefore, the 242 agreement, the 242 resolution did not give the Palestinians the 1967 armistice borderline. But now they want to go back to the 1967 borderlines, which a foreign minister of ours said once it was the Auschwitz border, and they want Jerusalem as their capital. And not just Jerusalem, but the old part of Jerusalem, which has one of the most holy places. Can you imagine the Jewish people without Jerusalem? Can you imagine the Jewish people without the temple? Temple Mount. All our history is built on Temple Mount. We had in Ariel University a conference, international conference, on the two-state solution. It is obvious that the two-state solution has failed. It is not feasible. The Arabs will not accept anything less than the 1967 borderlines. But when I say Palestinians, I must be more careful. The negotiations are not being carried out with the Palestinians. Abu Mazen does not represent the Palestinian people. He hardly represents the Fatah. Can you imagine that the Arabs negotiating with the Labour Party of Israel for a peace treaty? Actually, we are negotiating with a small part of the Palestinian people. So after we go back to the 1967 borderlines and we bring in hundreds of thousands of Arabs, suppose we concede to everything they want. We tell them, all right, what do you want? We'll give you everything, just make peace with us. Even if this happens, the Hamas is going to come later on and say, we did not do this agreement. It does not apply to us. And supposing we come to the Hamas and say, well, what do you want? We'll bring in another 500,000 Arabs. and they will sign a treaty with us. Then the jihad will come over and say, wait a minute, this does not apply to us. So there is no ending. There is no ending because we are not negotiating peace with the Palestinian people, as Arafat at the time said, that he represents all the Palestinian people. So the whole thing is not feasible. It cannot come into being. It's a myth. Therefore, we have to think about other solutions, and there are other solutions. And at the conference in Ariel, which took place last month, I promised to bring solution until the next conference, which will take place in December 2011. What we are trying to do is to have a think tank of people who are very much interested in the question of the two-state solution. And we want to make a think tank not only in Ariel, not only in Israel, but also here in the United States. And I've asked Steve Golder, who's with us here, to help in this matter. And I believe he's going to say a few words after me. But what we want here is to have a think tank also in Los Angeles, also in New York. It's going to be very important. Every one of us can contribute to that. And we want to find what sort of solution we can get. In Ariel, at the Center for Law and Mass Media, that I am chair, we are conducting research by professors and researchers in many fields. The field of international law, the field of mass media, the field of demography, and other fields as well, like sociology and history. For example, the Arabs speak about being in Palestine since time immemorial. Before the Jews. And they say we were always the majority. Where did these Arabs come from? How come Mark Twain in the 17th century said he was going through Palestine and he didn't see even one person walking in the land? It was a desert. It was a desert with all sorts of malaria and other illnesses. And since the Jews came over and started working very hard on the land, the Arabs poured in. Now you don't become a person who wants national, who wants to make a state. If you live there 100 years or 200 years, I can tell you, for example, that Jews in Iraq lived there 2,000 years. They were kicked out by hanging 18 Jews in the main public square in Baghdad. Egypt, Morocco. Jews lived there for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. This does not give them national rights. Now, why would the Arabs ask for national rights in the homeland of the Jews? And we should accept it. So what we're trying to do is find other solutions to the Israeli-Arab conflict. And it's not a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. it's an Israeli-Arab conflict. Because when we speak about two states, I would like to see the two states. I don't see two states. I see one state which is totally Palestinian, and another state where you have 1.5 million Arabs living in that state, and they say every day that they are Palestinians. I taught in Haifa University, in the Faculty of Law, for 7 years. And when you go into the restaurant, you think you are in Damascus. You think you are in Damascus. There's a very strong Arab Arab organization. They put on the Palestinian flag each time they demonstrate. They don't put the Israeli flag, mind you. I mean, you're demonstrating against the Israeli government, okay. But why Palestinian flag? And when they're interviewed, they say openly, we are Palestinians living in Israel. We don't see that we are Israelis. We have nothing to do with Israel. And they sit on a quota of the Jews. Because to study law, you need a very high grade. You need 10.5 grade, which is very, very high. Now, my daughter wanted to study law in Haifa, and she was not accepted because she did not have 10.5. But the Arabs get in with 8.5 and 9 average. Because they're Arabs, and you have in a class 1/3 of the students who are Arabs. They can hardly write or read Hebrew, and they want to be lawyers. But when they qualify, they know very well the way to the Supreme Court. Very well. And they cause a lot of headache. So, and they work against Israel. So the solution must be different, not a two-state solution. And let me tell you, I see 4 states. Not 2 states, but 4 states. 4 states that in the eyes of the Arabs will become all Palestinian. One is Jordan. 85% of the population of Jordan are Palestinians. The Queen of Jordan is Palestinian. Jordan is going to become Palestinian within a generation or 2 or 3, I don't know. But in the end, it's going to be Palestinian because that's the trend. Gaza is a state. It's not de jure, it's a de facto, but it's a state. It's Palestinian. The West Bank is Palestinian. The whole world sees the West Bank as Palestine. What's left? Israel. Israel has 1.5 million Palestinians. And if you think that to change, to destroy the Jewish nation, you need 51%, it's a mistake. All you need is that no prime minister in Israel can be elected without the Arab vote. In other words, if they are in the balance, if you have right and left, and to form a government you need just this little bit, then they're going to tell the prime minister, and there's always going to be a prime minister who will convince us that this is the best thing to do. They're going to tell him, abolish the law of return for the Jews. Or apply the law of return on the Palestinians as well as the Jews. And that's the end. You don't need bullets. They cannot win Israel by force, by military force. What they can do, and they are doing it, and they are applying it, we have 10 members of parliament who are Arabs. They have nothing to do with Israel. They are working as Palestinians, as a 5th column within the Israeli Knesset. And all you need is another 2 or 3 Palestinian Knesset members. They can make all the change. So we are sort of putting like an ostrich, putting our head in the sand and saying, there's no Arab problem in Israel. If we make a 2-state solution, we're not going to have apartheid, we're not going to have one state for the Jews and the Arabs, we're going to have a Jewish state and an Arab state. How wrong it is. So, what I want to do is, I want to invite you to join. You cannot imagine what every one of you can contribute. You don't need to spend more time than is necessary, more time than you can give. And Lily here, Lily, would you like to run? You can register with Lily, anybody who wants to participate in finding a solution of the Israeli-Arab conflict is welcome, more than welcome. And don't say, well, what do I know? I don't know anything about it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a demographer. I'm not a mass media man. You cannot imagine what you can do just with common sense. You can give an idea. You know, when I made my research, my PhD, I used to sit in a cafe and speak to people. And by speaking to them, I got ideas. And it helped me a lot. Sometimes when you discuss things with people, you come with an idea, you say, how is it that I didn't think about it? And so I really would like you to join in this. And I would like also to invite you to the next conference in Ariel University on December 2011. I can tell you that Ariel University is only 26 years old, but we have already 12,000 students, Arabs, Palestinians, Jews, Russian immigrants, Ethiopian immigrants. We have more Ethiopian immigrants than any other university in Israel. Not per capita, more than any other university in Israel. And it is a wonderful atmosphere. I can tell you, I taught in Tel Aviv University for 15 years. And I left Tel Aviv University for Ariel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next Prime Minister of Israel. Thank you for a very elucidative and simultaneously terrifying presentation. I'm not going to ask you a question because I prefer to open it up to the floor. Ed.
May I make a comment? You are the first Israeli, and I complimenting you as highly as I can. You are the first Israeli and almost the first Jew that I have ever heard speak the truth so eloquently and so clearly. But that's not the end of my question.
I understand. Okay. Any other questions? Steve?
That wasn't a question.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Ed. I thought
That was a comment.
Did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Go, babe.
We were talking a little earlier, and with all that.
Give him the mic. Yeah. I thought that sensorial voice would carry. Gorgeous voice, but.
Okay. Given all the facts that you have stated, and given the state of the world as it is today, my question is going to be, a gentleman over there thought that there was a possibility that what's happening in the world today is possibly for the good. I don't know how anybody can have that opinion, but anyway, somebody did. My question to you is, how can we, and you said something to me also, how can we possibly, where is there a possibility of optimism when the cards are so heavily stacked against Israel? Europe has, Elie Wiesel said that Europe is more anti-Semitic now than it was at the time of Hitler. Where is how can we have any optimism? How can I have any optimism?
Well, this is a very good question and a difficult one. But there is a lot of optimism. And, you know, if Herzl did not have optimism, Israel would not have been created. And when you see all over the way, the last 100 years, the greatest thing that happened in the 20th century was the birth of the State of Israel. It's amazing. How can we do that? By being united, by one voice, by deciding on the right path, by being able to say what our way is. Because until now, if you have 3 Jews sitting in a conference, you have 5 ideas. And I'm not saying something that is not true. Because with the negotiations, for example, with the Palestinians, always those who made the negotiations said, we are free people, everybody speaks on his own, everybody has a different thing, while the Palestinians come in and they speak in one voice. Speaking in one voice is one of the most important things. Now, it is important for the Israelis to speak in one voice. It's also important that the Jews abroad speak in one voice. What we are trying to do is to change the concept. What we are trying to do is to change the idea, the path that started in 1993. We want to do this in Israel, and want to do it the same way we want to do it abroad. I hope we'll succeed. If we don't succeed, then we have a problem. But I hope we'll succeed.
Yeah, we will.
Joyce?
You talk about creating a think. Oh, all right, thank you.
You talk about creating a think tank. We have there are a number of Jewish think tanks. For example, I'm thinking about the Washington Institute. It exists to support Israel, basically. Have you approached these people with your common sense to try to make them understand that Israel has been slitting its throat with the assistance of the mainstream Jewish organizations for at least 10 years, maybe more, 15 years? So have you approached these people?
I know that there are many organizations that are dealing with all sorts of views on the Israeli conflict and also about Israel. But we are in contact with a few organizations in the United States. No, the Washington Institute we haven't approached. But I'm not sure that the Washington Institute is doing exactly what we are doing. In other words, whether he's thinking is he doing the same?
They're decidedly to the left, but they need to talk to somebody like you.
Okay.
I mean,
If you could give me the address and the telephone number, I would be happy to approach them. It's very important. I agree.
Next question? Yes.
Professor Sion, I agree with everything you said. The two-state solution is really bad form for Israel. But I'm looking at the demographics, not only outside of Israel, but inside of Israel. And as we talked beforehand, I wonder if you'd comment about the President's commission about changing the form of government from a representational to, or from a proportionate to a representational form of government, and if that's got any chance of succeeding.
Well, I did work on this in the past. The proportionate vote is not going to do us good. Why is that? Because of the proportionate vote, we have 10 Arab members of parliament who, I don't mind if there are 10 Arab members as long as they feel Israelis. But we have 10 Arab members who have nothing to do with Israel, and they are doing nothing for their people except being a Palestinian fifth column in the Knesset. We need to have the other system, the system of
Representation.
no, it's the system of zones, whereby if we have zones, we can reduce the number of members of the Knesset maybe by half, which is very, very important because, as I tell you, the fear is that at some time or another, they don't have to be 51%. All they need is to balance, to be the balance in any vote.
Yeah.
So it's important that it will change. I have been working on it. The Knesset is working on it, but not officially. No, I'm afraid it's a little bit dormant. But it's a good thing that you brought it up because I think that it should be followed. It should be followed.
Let me get someone in the back. Somebody in a red shirt.
Steve,
Yes,
So I don't know who said this earlier, but somebody mentioned that that Europe is more anti-Semitic now than it was in the 1940s, and millions upon millions of Jews died in the 1930s and 40s in Europe. How is it anywhere near as anti-Semitic now as it was back then?
Well, I've been saying this for the last 2 or 3 years, that I feel that we are in 1938. The Nazis would never have been able to destroy 6 million Jews if it were not for the hatred of the European countries. And I feel that this is coming back. What's happening today is that instead of the Jews spread in Europe, because there are many fewer Jews in Europe than there used to be, Israel is the target. But it's not only Israel. Because if, God forbid, Israel's position will dwindle or go down, it's going to affect the Jews all over the world. And we are having, for example, Jews coming over as immigrants, new immigrants, from France, from Italy. They're being persecuted in their places of work. They're being persecuted in the streets. They've been beaten in the streets. This is something like the sale juif that was in France in 1938. Not in Germany.
Dirty Jew.
In France, dirty Jew. So, if you want me to compare, yes, I can compare. We are in 1938 now. And if we have to take caution, thank God we have Israel. Israel is a very strong country. Stronger than we can imagine. Only what Israel has doesn't work with the illegitimacy of the Europeans, the Muslims, the Arabs, the third world. That's the problem.
Two questions for you. First question, the Orient House was supposed to be the groups that were going to get together and start peace process and talks amongst the people. Is that a total failure, or was the intention never that? Second question I have for you, how is it that the Jews in America in particular, who were so, helped the Jewish state, you know, from the 50s to the 60s, how have we had such a strong left-wing, anti-Jewish sentiment amongst Jews? How has that developed here in America? I'm Jewish, I hear it, I feel it, I argue with it. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. How did the left in America become so anti-Israel and anti-Jewish?
Well, the Orient House was not a house where negotiations for peace were conducted. The Orient House was in Jerusalem, is in Jerusalem, and it was a place where the Palestinians worked to take control of Jerusalem, of East Jerusalem. And taking control of East Jerusalem for the Palestinians, when they bring in money and they pay for schools, they pay for education in East Jerusalem, which is part of Israel. And, you know, we took a blind eye on that because it was a leftist government, a government of the Labour Party, and they let the Orient House flourish until the Likud came in. And Uzi Landau, who was at the time a minister of internal security, and he just closed it. They were so afraid, they said, you know what's going to happen? It just closed it, and nothing happened. So when you are strict, when you know what you're doing, it works. When you start to hesitate, when you show fear, when you show lack of confidence, that is when the Arabs rise. I can also tell you when I was an officer in Gaza, you know, officers used to, every 30 days, they used to change. They used to come on the reserve. So when you have a leftist officer who thinks that the Palestinians are entitled to revolt, then you see that everything goes under, there's no control. But when somebody comes who knows his job, it's quiet. For 30 days, it's quiet. So you see the difference. Now your other question was, this is something that you should tell me. How come that the American Jews voted 78% for Obama?
Yeah.
How come that they are leftists? How come that they are so liberal? Well, I can tell you that the Jewish people are liberal. In the Neshama, they are liberal. They want to appease, they want to do good. You will never find a Jewish mother say, I want my son to be a martyr. I want him to die in condition that he will kill as many Jews possible, or Arabs. You will never find this with a Jewish mother, but with an Arab, with a Muslim mother. She says, my son was he was a shaheed, and I have 5 sons, and I want all of them to be shaheed. And when they ask the little children, what do you want to be when you are older? And he says, I want to be a shaheed. They say, why? He said, I want to kill as many Jews as possible. This is the education they get compared to the education we get.
I think it's a proper segue. If I may, I will not ask a question. I'll challenge. And I have 2 challenges. First of all, my first challenge is, why is it, it does turn out to be a question, why is it that the spiritual dimension, the prophetic dimension, is missing from the entire discourse, whether in the United States or in Israel? Whereas on the other side, the underlying reason of what we just described about Palestinian mother is not an inherent evilness of Palestinians, but it's the override idea that the land occupied by Israel is Waqf. dedicated to Allah and its sacred duty to liberate. We gave way, and this is my challenge, we gave way to liberal thinking in Israel when we gave away the idea of the biblical entitlement. And we cannot, in Ariel, or in Tel Aviv, or in Jerusalem, discuss the future of that region without bringing it in. But we had discredited that idea way before Oslo. So where is your analysis of the fact that this whole notion of Israel being a dedicated land to Jews from up above is entering the picture? Because we cannot win Palestinians when we win on the invisible world that they're so intimately connected to, and we have lost much of the connection with them.
I couldn't agree with you more. The basis of our return to the land of Israel is the Bible. It's only a book. It's a few hundred pages. But this book has been the basis for all religions. I don't know how many of you read the Quran. But the Quran states the stories of the Bible. Only because Muhammad did not know how to read and write. Somebody must have told him the stories. And he wrote it down. So therefore, the stories of Joseph, of Moses, are all there, but distorted. You can see that it's something that somebody told him and he told somebody to write. So I couldn't agree with you more. And why is it that we do not put these things up, bring them on the table? There are many things that we forgot to put on the table. This is one of them. And this must be changed.
Since the Palestinian Arabs are a danger to Israel, why is it that they are being given an advantage over Israelis, such as being able to go into law school with a lower score? And in the same spirit, what happens to that officer that you described who's a liberal, who comes and there's chaos for 30 days? Is he not brought up on charges and discipline for not having control?
Yes.
I mean, these are the things that, make us wonder whether any solution will ever come about if we can't stand up for ourselves and control the situation. So what can be done?
Democracy has a price. And Israel is a democracy. I can tell you that as head of the academic division of the Likud party, whenever there are elections that the Likud gain power, I used to go to our ministers and tell them that I have in my kitty doctors and lawyers and engineers who can contribute a lot to the Likud ideas. And I want you to give them positions in the new government. And they used to say, there is only room at the moment for Arabs. Why is that? Because there are not enough Arabs. In the papers, they come up and say there are not enough Arabs in board of directors of government companies. if they are 20% of the population, and believe me, we have a strong leftist group in the Knesset, and they put in a law that the Arabs should be made, that the Arabs should be, put in the front before Jews, because they are, if they have to be 80% Jews and 20% Arabs, and they are already 80% Jews, then you cannot put any Jew there. The place is open only for Arabs. They ask me, do you have an Arab doctor? Do you have an Arab engineer? Do you have an Arab... and as much as it sounds ridiculous, this is the situation. And as I say, democratic state has a problem here. But with the officer who comes over, one should ask, where was he brought up? In what sort of family? What sort of education did he get? And you might find out that such an officer may be a communist, may be somebody who believes in the right of the Arabs for a state. You know, in one of the discussions I had with a young member of the Central Committee of the Labour Party, and he said, look, we had a war, we fought for independence. The Arabs are also entitled to independence. So he tried to explain the bombing in buses. And I said, so we bring Arafat from Tunis to fight us in the Holy Land to gain independence? So you can see how sometimes stupidity can be. But this is the situation.
You talk about Oslo as being a demarcation point. It would be better to say that in 1967, when the West Bank wasn't annexed as well, that was the true demarcation point, because the right of return for the Jewish people, based on the Bible, wasn't being adhered to even then. Would you say that's the demarcation point? Why haven't we dealt with that issue?
You know, in 1967, there may have been something like 600,000 Arabs, Palestinians. They were not called Palestinians then, mind you, but 600,000 Arabs in the West Bank and another 150,000 Arabs in Gaza. And we were afraid to annex the West Bank and Gaza, because we were afraid that if we annexed this area, then we'd have another 750 Arabs on top of the Arabs that we had at the time. Today, there's a feeling that we would have acted much better if we would have annexed at the time Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And maybe that would have brought an end to the question of the Palestinian state. But it was not done. And I can tell you that in the Supreme Court of Israel, there was a big question. It was a debate. In the court, in the judgments, when Arabs went to the Supreme Court from Judea and Samaria, the court said, do they have a right to come to the court? I mean, are they occupied? Is it an occupation? And the Attorney General said, because we are holier than the Pope, it doesn't matter. In other words, he said that anyway, we are dealing with those Arabs according to the Geneva Convention and according to the Hague Convention, Because of that, it doesn't matter. You can judge us according to the Geneva Convention because that's what we're doing. And since then, the Supreme Court regards Judea and Samaria as occupied territory, and that the Geneva Convention applies.
I wanted to thank you first of all for coming in and speaking to us. I need some advice because I have always been a staunch defender of Israel. I've educated myself. I've majored in it. It's been my passion for a long time. But for a while now, I've been feeling like we, the youth, as well as just the intelligentsia, the pro-Israel intelligentsia, we're using the same lines, we're using the same anecdotes over and over again. We're using the biblical approach, we're using the, their birth rate is going up, so soon they're gonna outnumber us. All those lines that feel repetitive, and I don't feel like anything new is being brought to the table that I can use to defend my country. And it just seems kind of nihilistic. And I'm losing faith. And it's bothering me because I don't want to be cynical at 24, but it seems as though we're just using the same thing over and over again and nothing new. And I don't think the Israeli government really cares that it's losing a PR war. The Palestinians are winning. They have the public opinion. Everyone supports them. Even you just said Jews from America are supporting that. So, how can you advise me to not feel as cynical as I do about the situation?
Number 1, join ZOA. Number 2, you'll be welcome on our think tank.
Well, all I can tell you is do not lose hope. I can give you an example from experience I had. I was in Norway. And I was driving a car to Sweden. And I was driving and driving. And then I felt that I would like to stop at a restaurant on the way. I stopped at a restaurant on the way and I wanted to buy a sandwich. And I presented the coins and they said, "This won't do. This is Norwegian coins. This is Sweden." I said, "How come?" There was no border. There were no police officers. There was nobody. They said, "Yes, we are Sweden. This is not Norway." Then I got to Stockholm and I went to a museum. And in the museum, I had such a strange feeling because in the museum they showed wars between Norway and Sweden for 300 years. So you can have wars between nations, and in the end peace will come. Only I want peace to come on our terms, not on the terms of the Arabs. So don't lose faith, and you're certainly invited to join us in the think tank.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize to my husband.
This is a short digression. We're all very concerned with the war and the civil strife that's taking place in Egypt. Egypt has a treaty with Israel for the past 30 years or 40 or 50 years. How do you think the present dilemma, the present problems that are being created there are going to affect the ultimate peacekeeping ability with the state of Egypt?
Yeah, this is a question that is causing a lot of concern in Israel. I'm on the phone and on the email every day with Israel. And it is a concern, and I can tell you that in Israel, television and radio is focused on the situation in Egypt. It only shows that Israel is not the cause for trouble. The trouble is more Arab than Israeli. But we have a peace treaty with Egypt. It is a very cold peace treaty. In fact, it is not a peace treaty between nations. As an attorney, I can tell you that the Israeli bar tried to approach the Egyptian bar many times. And the Egyptian bar wouldn't want to have anything to do with the Israeli bar. The people in Egypt do not come to Israel. Some of them hate Israel. So this is not a real peace between nations. We give something very tangible. We give Sinai. We gave the Suez Canal. We give the oil and the gas and the tourist attractions, and also the great area that was there between Israel and Egypt. We did it for peace, for real peace. And when Sadat came over to Israel, we believed, in contrary to Arafat, we believed that Sadat really means peace. And he really meant peace. In his opinion, he wanted real peace. But Mubarak had a very frozen peace with Israel. He never stepped, his foot never stepped in Israel. And because of that, because the peace is not between nations, there is fear that if Mubarak goes, that the whole peace treaty will come to an end. And this will be very, very difficult for Israel. But Israel can survive that as well.
I'm sorry, Gerald?
As a professor of law, can you comment to us about the Israeli Supreme Court, which you brought up a couple of times, and what the future of that Supreme Court could possibly be to improve that court? And one other thing, the professors...
To improve the court?
I would hope so. The other thing is the professors at some of the top universities in Israel, specifically Ben Gurion University with this professor, Gershon, what's his last name? Gershon, the one who's so pushing for the divestment of Israel, boycott of Israel. Come on, remember the name. Gershon. Neve Gordon, thank you. And other professors. What is happening on your side, or what should happen on your side? What should be the policy in reference to professors of this nature? And that's great.
Well, about the Supreme Court, I can tell you, I can speak now and end up in the morning. There is so much to speak about the Supreme Court of Israel. I don't know whether I can go into details, but I can tell you the Supreme Court of Israel is unique. It's the only court in the world that has control over the country. The Supreme Court of Israel allows any person to approach the Supreme Court without having to go to the magistrate's court or to the district court, straight away to the Supreme Court, and bring up anything that it's in its mind. For example, I live in Tel Aviv, and I can come to the Supreme Court and I'll say, why is there no water in the Carmel? The Carmel has nothing to do with me. I mean, I go to the Carmel, to Mount Carmel once a year or once in 2 years, but I can go to the Supreme Court and bring a petition. Now, when every person in Israel can come up to the Supreme Court and bring a petition, it means that the Supreme Court is controlling the whole affairs in Israel. Because there's always a petition, and the Supreme Court stands over and decides what to do. As happened now with the chief of staff elect, the new chief of staff elect in Israel. Can you imagine somebody who has nothing to do with him goes to the Supreme Court and says he has problems with land, and he stepped down because the Supreme Court interfered. So we are in such a difficult position now with Egypt, with the world. The chief of staff is maybe the most important person in Israel. And now we are looking for a new chief of staff because of the Supreme Court. I don't see the Supreme Court being changed within the foreseen future. It's so strong, and it's backed by all the left and part of the right. They think it's very important that we have a very strong Supreme Court. But I can tell you many times I feel that the decisions of the Supreme Court are much more than necessary for a court. They are not a court, but they are ruling Israel. And that is not what a court should do.
Let's see, Victoria and Rick. Okay, hold on. Victoria? Okay, after Victoria, one more question, and then we'll have Steve Goldberg come up and say what he wants to say.
I was just wondering if you can give us a little bit deeper foresight into the academia's elitist attitude and what they really think the end game will be if they're able to accomplish, which they seem to be directing us towards, a very leftist direction, that what the end result will look like. Are they even projecting what their final outcome will be?
Sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
Well, the question is, being in academia, I was wondering if you had opportunities to have conversations with some of the other more left-leaning professors and what their real goal and objective is, what they see going forward if they're able to accomplish what they are directing us towards. What is that picture? I'm really fascinated to know what they want to see.
In other words, what's wrong with them?
But what they see, what they envision, because...
Why are they so blind?
Yeah.
Why are they blind?
With some of them, it's a waste of time to have discussions. With the other part, I did have quite a lot of talks. And they feel that Israel should be all agreeing, that is, a light to all nations. To be a light to all nations, you must take the Arabs and hug them and give them same opportunities. Now, I don't know if they are very much acquainted with the facts. Many times, people are not acquainted, even though they're academics. Well, a physician is very good in what he's doing, but not necessarily he knows what's happening in the world. So, they think that the Arabs are not provided well by the Israeli government. He sees, for example, cities, Arab cities, who are much less cultivated than the Jewish cities. But what he doesn't say is that the Arabs don't go to the army. The Arabs begin high education at the age of 18, while their Jewish counterparts start at the age of 21, 22. They have no responsibility. They don't even want to go to work in hospitals, for example, instead of going to the army. They pay very low taxes. Many of the Arabs don't feel that they belong to Israel, therefore they don't want to pay taxes, and they put everything in the black market. So they don't know these facts, or they don't want to see these facts. What they see is that the Arab villages are less, they're less cultivated than the Jewish ones. They see the difference. They see that Arabs cannot get work as much as Jews can get work, and they see that there is discrimination against Arabs. That's what he sees, and he says this cannot be in a country which is Jewish country. Don't forget, we were in ourselves. We were in all sorts of countries, and we were discriminated against, and that's the way they see it. And sometimes it's not one of us who opens their eyes, but the reality opens their eyes. I can tell you, for example, one of the polls that we did in Ariel at this conference. We asked the question, how many of you think that a peace treaty, a real peace treaty between Israel and the Palestinians is feasible? And 70% said, there is no chance in our generation for a peaceful treaty. Now, if it's 70% of the Jewish population, that means that something like 20% of the lefts stop believing in the Oslo Agreement. Now, this happened because of reality, not because somebody convinced them.
David, go ahead. One last question now.
Then we begin the real discussion.
Well, wouldn't peace require a complete change in the Muslim point of view? In other words, a reformation, a renaissance, a transformation, a global change in thinking. I don't see that that's something the U.S. or Israel can force or create. Is there any chance of it coming anytime soon, or are we hoping for the Mashiach?
Coming now.
Well, I think that things would change. Of course, I'm being optimistic, but if I were not optimistic, maybe I wouldn't have lived in Israel. The feeling is that things will turn right in the end. And why is that? Because things cannot go wrong all the time. In the end, they turn out right. This is what happens, you know. And we've had many wars in the past, and I believe we haven't finished with confrontation with enemies. But I'm optimistic, and I hope you aren't.
I'd like to introduce Steve Goldberg. For those of you who don't know him, he's on our board of directors.
Ray Steve!
Yay!
First of all, on behalf of the ZOA, I want to thank all of you for coming here to hear this brilliant elucidation of the situation Israel's facing. For those of you who are not already part of the ZOA, if you agree with what Professor Sion said, that is our position to a T, and I urge you to join and support us. Numbers count in terms of presenting our point of view to members of Congress and the U.S. government. I also want to thank Professor Sion for coming here. It's been my privilege to become his friend over the past several months. What he says is critically important. 20 years ago, people were not talking about a Palestinian state. Even Yitzhak Rabin, the avatar of peace, was against the Palestinian state up until his death. Somehow that's now become the conventional wisdom, and I hear over and over again, it's a fait accompli, it's inevitable, it has to happen. It doesn't. And what I commend Professor Sion for is putting into the public discourse that there needs to be an alternative, one of common sense. Until people have the guts to start to propose it and say it in public and do it in an intellectual and respectable and common sense way, it's got no chance. But if it happens and it's presented that way, it can succeed. I think his idea of people getting together to share ideas to come up with this alternative is the only way to be done. I invite anybody who's got ideas, who wants to help, to talk to Lily, talk to me, contact Professor Sion. As far as his think tank is concerned, I'm willing to dive in.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, great.
With that, good night.